My name is Rebecca Ann. I'm 32 and I grew up in the suburban outskirts of Bellevue, Washington, a place where everyone knew each other's names and secrets seemed impossible to hide. I married my high school sweetheart, Ethan Carter, when I was 24. We dreamed of a happy life, cozy home, steady jobs, and weekend hikes under evergreen trees. Then my world shattered. I discovered that my sister, Marissa Blake, the woman I loved, trusted, and shared secrets with, had been having an affair with Ethan. It was months of betrayal, gaslighting, and cruel smiles. They waited until I was pregnant with our first child to reveal it. She left me with nothing, my dignity crushed, my husband gone, and our baby born under a cloud of heartbreak. I disappeared, not to punish them, to rebuild. For 5 years, I lived in Portland, working late nights as a boutique operations manager. Every penny I earned went into a sock drawer hidden beneath floorboards. I went back to school, learned business strategy, supply chain logistics, and the brutal art of hiring and firing. No one recognized me when I returned to Bellevue in October except the dog next door who still wagged his tail at my knock.by. November, I quietly launched the brand Willow and Sage Women's Boutique with a mission: empower silently, grow steadily. Online orders soared. Then I opened a pop-up, followed by a downtown store. By early December, I was contacted by a private investment firm. We agreed on a secret acquisition. I would buy Marissa's 3-store boutique chain Blake & Co., valued at roughly $2 million. Not for profit but for justice, because she deserved to feel the sting of unexpected loss. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I say it's served on Christmas Eve. That brings us here. Today, December 23, 8:07 a.m. as I walk into my final meeting with Marissa's CFO at her flagship Bellevue store. The front window displays offer holiday dresses, but the real drama is happening behind closed doors. I clutch my coffee cup tight, feeling every penny of all those years paying off, not in money, but in focus, strategy, and sealed envelopes. In days, we'll unveil the acquisition. In 3 days, on Christmas Eve, she'll learn her resume wasn't enough to keep her own stores. Tonight, I sleep soundly, because in business and in life I own what I earn. And on Christmas Eve, I'll be calling her in for a different kind of performance review. The morning air in Bellevue had a sharp bite, one of those icy December chills that crawls into your bones. But I wasn't cold. No, I was burning with focus, with nerves, and with years of silent rage turned into purpose. I stepped into Blake & Co., the boutique my sister Marissa had built on stolen trust. She always had a flair for the aesthetic: sleek rose gold racks, velvet display tables, candle scents that whispered money. But none of it was hers anymore. Not after I signed the final acquisition papers last night. I walked past the mannequins, in glitter gowns like a woman on a mission, because I was. Marissa's employees didn't recognize me, not even Chloe, the assistant who once texted me happy birthday back when I was still her boss's sister-in-law. That was fine. I didn't want them to remember me yet. The meeting was short. Mr. Hardwick, the company's CFO, looked nervous. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat as he handed me the final breakdown. Sorry, Miss Collins, he said, still unused to my professional pseudonym. The transition is fully processed. Your ownership is complete. Staff employment contracts are untouched for now. Would you like to remain anonymous until Christmas Eve as discussed? I nodded once firmly. Absolutely. And thank you for keeping it airtight. He hesitated, then glanced over his glasses. May I ask, why the secrecy? I took a slow breath, then smiled. Because revenge, I said softly, is like wine, better when aged. Later that day, I parked across the street from my childhood home, a 2-story colonial, white siding and black shutters, still with the same Christmas wreath on the front door my mom had hung every year. But she was gone now. Cancer took her 2 years ago, and with her went the only warmth I had left for this town. I didn't go inside. I just watched Marissa walk out with Ethan, both dressed like a catalog couple, him in cashmere, her in emerald silk. Like betrayal could ever be elegant. They loaded gifts into the back of their SUV, probably headed to the boutique for the Christmas party. Marissa always did love throwing herself a celebration. I had something better planned. Back at the boutique, I met with Laura, my PR consultant. She slid a folder across the table and grinned. Everything's prepped. Press release goes out Christmas Day. But your surprise for the staff is set for the party tomorrow evening, just like you wanted. Perfect, I said. We reviewed the new name, Ann & Co. I insisted on using my middle name. Not Rebecca, not the girl they discarded, but the woman I rebuilt. Ann, strong and clean, like freshly poured concrete. Unbreakable. You sure you want to fire her publicly? Laura asked carefully. It's a bold move. I looked at her dead in the eye. She didn't hesitate when she walked down the aisle. In my place. I won't hesitate now. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked the floor of my rented condo, champagne glass in hand, laptop open to the boutique staff page. There was Marissa's bio. Founder, innovator, visionary. What a joke. I deleted every word, typed in bold, former owner. Terminated? As of December 24, and I smiled, because this time, I wouldn't be the one left empty-handed. Christmas Eve in downtown Bellevue was picture perfect. Strings of warm lights shimmered along the sidewalks, carolers sang outside the church steps, and the cold air held the kind of sharpness that made your memories feel crisper too. I watched, from across the boutique, sitting quietly in the back of a black town car with tinted windows. The sign still read Blake & Co., but not for long. Inside the boutique, everything was ready. Champagne flutes gleamed on the marble counter, and tiny Christmas trees decorated every corner. Staff mingled in designer dresses, laughter floated out through the glass doors, and in the center stood Marissa, my sister, my traitor, my greatest lesson. She was glowing as usual, dressed in red satin, wearing the very smile she'd practiced since we were little. Charming, poised, utterly false. Ethan stood beside her, his hand resting on her waist like I hadn't once been the one he promised forever to. That same hand had once held mine under the table at Thanksgiving, years ago, when I still believed he meant what he said. They made toasts. To success, Marissa said, raising her glass. To family. I nearly choked on the bitter taste of irony. At 7:45 p.m., Laura gave the signal. I stepped out of the car and walked toward the boutique. I wore black, a sharp, tailored coat with silver buttons, hair swept into a bun, heels clicking on the pavement. I looked like everything they once said I could never become: powerful, composed, untouchable. The security guard opened the door for me. He had no idea who I was. No one did, until I stepped into the spotlight. The music dimmed. The room fell into a hush. Eyes turned, and then hers. Marissa's smile faltered. She blinked twice, then whispered, Rebecca. I smiled, calm and cruel. Happy Christmas, Marissa. Ethan looked like he'd seen a ghost. Good. I wanted him to feel haunted. Marissa stepped forward, clutching her flute like a lifeline. What are you doing here? I pulled a crisp white folder from my purse and handed it to her. These are your termination papers, I said, voice level. As of this moment, you no longer own a single stitch of this boutique. Your employment is terminated. You are no longer affiliated with Blake & Co., or should I say, N & Co. Gasps echoed. A few staff members actually stepped back. Marissa's face drained of all color. This is insane. This is fraud. I raised my brow. You'll find everything has been executed legally, through shell companies and quiet acquisitions over the past year. My name is on every contract now. I'm the majority shareholder. And I didn't need a man to do it. Ethan stepped in, jaw tight. Rebecca, this is cruel. I turned to him. So was leaving me with a note the night before our wedding. Gasps again. Someone dropped a glass. Marissa looked like she was ready to explode, but I kept going. Oh, and by the way, I added casually, your holiday bonus? It's being redistributed equally among staff earning under $40,000 a year. Merry Christmas. The room erupted, not in anger, but applause. Half the boutique employees had worked long hours for pennies while Marissa took spa trips and wore $600 sweaters. Now they were cheering, for me. Marissa's voice cracked. You don't know what you've done. I leaned in close enough for only her to hear. I rebuilt myself from ash while you danced in the ruins you made, and now I own the floor you're standing on. And with that, I turned away. Behind me, the party resumed, but the power had shifted. I had taken back what she stole, and I did it with the poise of a woman who no longer needed permission to exist. I had waited years for this moment, and it was better than I imagined. When I walked out of the boutique that night, I didn't feel triumphant, not in the way I thought I would. Sure, I had delivered a public reckoning with all the flair of a courtroom climax. I had returned the shame, doubled and gift-wrapped, to the very people who had handed it to me years ago. But revenge, I was learning, is only the first course. It doesn't fill you, it awakens your hunger for something more lasting. Something like peace. Snow had started to fall gently. Bellevue's streetlights cast long golden shadows across the sidewalk, and the sound of music and murmurs faded. Behind me, I walked alone. No crowd, no champagne, no applause, only me and my past trailing closely behind. A memory came back then, sharp as a thorn. Christmas Eve, 7 years ago. I was wearing a green velvet dress, standing under mistletoe, waiting for Ethan. He was late. An hour passed. Then 2. At midnight, my phone rang. No apologies, just silence, followed by a sigh, then his voice. I'm not coming. I'm with Marissa. I'm sorry. That was the last Christmas I spent in Bellevue. I vanished after that cut. TIs with everyone, moved to Oregon, worked 2 jobs, enrolled in business school on scholarship, and kept my head down. My heart was wreckage, but my ambition became the hammer that rebuilt me. I didn't chase wealth for wealth's sake. I chased it so I'd never again have to beg someone to stay. And tonight, I didn't beg. I took. The next morning, I awoke to headlines. Holiday hostel takeover. Boutique queen replaced on Christmas Eve. Sister act. From scorn to CEO. I didn't read the articles. I didn't need to. Instead, I made breakfast for me and my mother. Yes, the same mother who once told me, Marissa is just stronger than you, Rebecca. You take things too personally. She was older now, slower, grayer, and perhaps guiltier. She stirred her coffee quietly. I saw the news, she said. Everyone has. I nodded. Figured they would. I suppose you're expecting. Congratulations. No, I said, placing a biscuit on her plate. I just want the truth. She looked up, startled. What truth? Why you always protected her, even when she hurt me. The silence was long. I was afraid, she whispered. Afraid Marissa would fall apart. You always got back up. I took advantage of that. Her honesty stung more than any lie ever had. But it was real, and I could work with real. Later that afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. I recognized Ethan's handwriting instantly. Rebecca, you did what I never had the courage to do. Start over. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm sorry. You were always the better one. I just didn't know how to love you the way you deserved. I folded the letter and placed it in the fire. It burned slowly, the edges curling like autumn leaves. I didn't need his regret. I needed his absence. By nightfall, I walked through the boutique again, my boutique now. The name Ann & Co. glistened proudly above the entrance. Inside, I had the staff rearrange the displays, remove the pretentious, imported candles, and replaced them with handmade crafts from local artisans. I turned Marissa's marble office into a break room. I gave the seamstress, Irene, who had worked and paid overtime for years, a raise and a title, Director of Artisan Affairs. And I gave myself something I had never allowed before, forgiveness, not for what I did to them, but for ever doubting my worth. As I looked out the glass window, I saw something beautiful. A little girl, maybe 9 or 10, pressed her face against the display. Her mittens were tattered, her coat too thin, but her eyes, they sparkled. I opened the door and stepped into the snow. Merry Christmas, I said. She smiled shyly. Your store is pretty. So are you, I said, kneeling. Come inside. You can help me decorate our new tree. She lit up like the star we hadn't yet placed, because sometimes the best part of revenge is building something softer from the ruins. Christmas morning came with soft snow and a clear sky, an almost theatrical contrast to the storm I had stirred the night before. I woke up to a dozen voicemails. My cousin Annie, a former classmate, even someone from the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce, but not Marissa, not Ethan, and not my father, and that suited me just fine. Instead of picking up the phone, I picked up my pen. I began signing the new contracts I'd been working on for the past 2 years. Marissa's boutique empire hadn't just been inherited, it had been bought, dissected, and quietly rebuilt under a new umbrella. Everhart and Ann Holdings. Everhart was the silent partner, a wealthy investor from Montana who never showed her face but trusted me implicitly, because Everhart was me. It was a name I'd adopted when I started over. Rebecca Everhart. Clean, strong, forgettable. With that alias, I created LLCs, bought out small vendors, and eventually positioned myself to acquire Marissa's struggling boutiques one location at a time. She never saw me coming, because I didn't come for revenge. I Came for Control.by noon. I visited Aubrey and Ash, the original Bellevue flagship location now quietly rebranded under my name. The front door still had gold handles, but gone were the overpriced imported chandeliers and pretentious private client lounge. In their place, local artwork, warm lamps, open shelves. The employees were smiling, not forced, but genuinely. Miss Anne, Irene greeted me warmly. The new fabric shipment arrived this morning, all the way from Texas. Want to see? I followed her into the back room where bolts of fabric in rich tones emerald, plum, indigo were stacked in proud rows. These aren't for display, she said. They're for the new winter line, right? I smiled. They're for women who don't want to dress like someone else's fantasy. They're for women who want to look like themselves. She nodded, eyes misting. You've saved this place. You know. No, I said gently. We saved it, together. Later that evening, I took a drive through the outskirts of Bellevue. The snow blanketed the roads in silence. It was hard to believe this town had once been my prison, each coffee shop, park bench, and church steeple a reminder of who I used to be. As I passed the old Tanner estate, I slowed. Lights were on inside. Marissa's silhouette moved across the curtain, pacing. There was a time I would have cried seeing her, or flinched, or driven away. But tonight, I felt still. Because she wasn't the villain of this story. I was the one who vanished, rebuilt, and returned, not to destroy but to take what should have been hers and make it mine. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope I'd been saving. I had written it a year ago, before I knew how all this would end. It read, Marissa, one day, you'll lose everything you used to hurt me. Not because I punished you, but because you never thought I'd become the kind of woman who could. I didn't mail it. I left it in the mailbox at the boutique, the one she still checked out of habit. She'd find it eventually, and when she did, she'd know that power once given away can be reclaimed. And when reclaimed, it doesn't have to be cruel. It can be quiet, graceful, final. I returned home that night and stood in front of the mirror, not to admire, not to judge, just to witness myself, the woman who had been humiliated at the altar, the woman who was left behind at family dinners, the woman who now owned everything her sister once flaunted. I no longer needed closure, because I had something better, clarity, and that was worth more than any boutique or bank account. Outside, carolers passed under street lamps. Their voices drifted through the windows like soft snowfall, and as I poured myself a glass of wine, I whispered, Merry Christmas. To me, 2 days after Christmas, I received an invitation. It came in the form of a cream-colored envelope, with my name scrawled in hurried cursive. Rebecca, please come. We need to talk. Momi hadn't seen my mother in 5 years, not since the day she told me I was embarrassing the family by accusing Marissa and Ethan of betrayal. Not since she asked me to be a lady and leave quietly, and I did, like a good daughter. But now apparently I was needed. I didn't respond to the letter, but curiosity got the better of me. So that evening, just after dusk, I drove up the familiar gravel driveway of the house I once called home. It hadn't changed. The tall iron gates, the manicured hedges shaped like reindeer, the fountain that never worked, all still there, frozen in a portrait of past privilege. The porch light was on, and I spotted my mother pacing in her woolen shawl. When she saw me, she hesitated, then opened the door. Rebecca, she said softly. Mrs. Carlton, I replied coldly. She flinched. Please, don't. I stepped inside. The warmth hit me like a memory. Cinnamon and pine, fireplace crackle, the muffled sound of a string quartet playing Christmas music on the radio. It was the same setting in which they once celebrated Marissa's engagement to the man who had proposed to me first. My mother offered tea, which I declined. She sat opposite me in the parlor, her hands wringing a monogrammed handkerchief. I wanted you to know. Marissa's losing everything. I stayed silent. She's distraught. Ethan left. The boutiques are collapsing. She says you're behind it. I met her eyes. I am. Her lip quivered. Why would you do this to your own sister? Would you like the short version or the 10-year saga? She looked down. I gave you all a chance to believe me back then, I continued. You chose her lies over my truth. Now you want to know why I've rewritten her future? Because I rewrote mine first, and it didn't include forgiveness for people who never apologized. My mother cried. I didn't. There was nothing left inside me for those kinds of tears. I was wrong. she whispered. I should have stood by you. But you're my daughter, Rebecca, my firstborn. You don't have to destroy us. I'm not destroying anyone. I'm just claiming what was always mine. Self-worth, she nodded. Slowly. As I stood to leave, she gripped my wrist. Please, just help her. It's Christmas. I peeled her hand away gently. Christmas, I said, is for redemption, not rescue. As I drove away, the snow began again. Light, fluttering flakes dusted the windshield like whispers of forgiveness I no longer needed. I parked near the hill overlooking downtown Bellevue, the city glowing with amber lights and quiet traffic. Below, I could see one of the boutique locations once owned by Marissa, now one of the best performing stores under my rebranded chain, Reclaimed Grace. The name was intentional. Women who had been broken by others were now designing, sewing, marketing, and selling their own creations. I had turned my revenge into redemption for all of us, and still, a small voice inside me whispered, what now? I had my justice, my empire, my peace, but a strange hollowness remained. Not regret, not guilt, just space. I took out the photo. I kept in my coat pocket. It was worn and creased, but I kept it close. Me, Marissa, and Ethan. From a 4th of July picnic before it all went wrong. We looked happy. Or rather, I looked happy. The two of them were those fake grins people use when they're hiding something. I tucked the photo back into my coat. Sometimes, healing doesn't come with closure. It comes with acceptance. Acceptance that not every apology will come, and not every story ends with a bow. Some just end with a better version of you. It was Christmas Eve again. Exactly 8 years since Ethan stood at the altar with Marissa, while I sat 2 pews back in a borrowed dress, biting the inside of my cheek so I wouldn't cry. 8 years since they told the world that their betrayal was God's plan and I was just an overreacting ex. But tonight, I wore power, a tailored midnight blue wool coat, gold trim lining the cuffs, a silk scarf tucked neatly around my collarbone, and leather gloves that felt like armor. Outside, the snow kissed the sidewalks like frosting. I walked into Graceland Boutique, the flagship store, the one Marissa had loved most, the one she didn't know she no longer owned. Inside, lights twinkled above displays of handmade scarves, delicate ornaments, and custom dresses sewn by the women of the Reclaimed Grace Initiative, the nonprofit I'd launched last year with my own hands and heart. Women like me, betrayed, bruised, brilliant. There, near the front counter, Marissa stood in a red velvet dress, her blonde hair pulled back to tightly, her hands trembling as she rang up a last-minute customer. She looked thinner, harder, older, and behind her, taped to the glass wall, was the notice of acquisition with the new company letterhead at the bottom, owned and operated by Rebecca Ann Holdings LLC. She hadn't seen me yet. So I walked up slowly, calmly. My heels echoed against the pine-scented wooden floor like a clock ticking toward fate. Hello, Marissa, I said. She turned. Color drained from her face. Rebecca, she whispered, voice hoarse. What are you doing here? I came to collect the final receipt. She blinked. What are you talking about? I gestured to the sign behind her. I bought you, your business, your pride and joy. Merry Christmas. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. You, what? I've been a silent investor in this chain for over 2 years. You just didn't know. I waited for the right moment to remove the final curtain. I took off my gloves. You fired me from your wedding guest list. You mocked my heartbreak. You slept with the man who asked for my hand, then told people I made it up. But I didn't come for vengeance. I came for transformation. And I wanted to see your face when you realized, she gripped the counter, that I never needed your apology, just your resignation. She stumbled backward. You can't do this. This is my life. No, I said gently. It was mine first. My dream, my sketches, my designs. You took all of it, and now it's home. A silence passed between us. Leave the keys on the counter, I said. Your final check's already deposited. She stared at me. I'm your sister. No, I said, turning toward the door. You were my lesson. Outside, the cold bit my cheeks, but I didn't shiver. At the end of the block, a line of women waited by the corner. Our staff, our survivors, our designers. They had no idea what had just happened inside. They only knew tonight was our annual Christmas Eve dinner at the shelter. A dinner I'd started 5 years ago with one donated roast and a crock pot of borrowed soup. Tonight, there'd be filet mignon. Marissa would be fine. She always landed on her feet, just not in stilettos made of someone else's dignity. As I walked toward my car, the church bells rang midnight. Christmas Day had arrived, but I had already unwrapped what mattered: closure, the warmth of the shelter's dining room hit me like a hug. It wasn't gold chandeliers or imported wine like the fancy boutique openings Marissa used to host. No, this place smelled like real food, cinnamon and ham, laughter, and something else money couldn't buy: freedom. Every seat at the long oak tables was filled runaway teens, single mothers, women who'd escaped men like Ethan. I spotted Delilah, once a battered wife from East Memphis, now head of operations at our Atlanta branch. Next to her was Maya, a 19-year-old who'd slept in a laundromat last Christmas and now ran her own seamstress station. I walked in, the front door creaking behind me. Silence fell, then applause. I smiled, but not the practiced one from my old days of pageants and fundraisers. This one reached my eyes. Amanda, one of the teens, called out, "Did we really buy the boutique?" "Yes," I said, stepping forward. "We did." Gasps and cheers filled the room. Some women clapped, others cried. A few just held their forks mid-air like the moment had paused history. But I didn't do it alone, I added. Each one of you, every scarf sewn, every shift worked, every hour volunteered, this belongs to all of us now. I didn't tell them about Marissa's face when she handed over the keys. I didn't tell them about Ethan's latest DUI arrest 2 months ago or how their marriage had publicly collapsed under debt and suspicion. I wasn't here to rub salt in wounds. I was here to show them the salve. After dinner, I sat by the fireplace. In the back office now, my private little haven, filled with photo frames of our team, letters from girls we'd helped, and old pencil sketches I once made in a notebook labeled "Someday." There, tucked in a drawer, was something I hadn't looked at in years: the wedding invitation from Ethan and Marissa. I pulled it out and read it slowly, together with their families. What a joke that had been. They weren't together anymore, and the only family I had now were the women outside this office who cheered when I walked in and worked double shifts without ever asking for applause. That night, as snow quietly blanketed the city and the shelter dimmed its lights, I wrote a letter. Not to Marissa, not to Ethan, but to myself, 10 years ago. Dear Rebecca, you cried yourself to sleep the night he chose her. You thought you'd never heal. You were wrong. You grew stronger, sharper, kinder. You built something no betrayal could destroy. You became the woman you were always meant to be. I folded it and slid it into the back of the sketchbook marked "Someday." It was no longer a dream. It was Christmas, and for once, I wasn't the forgotten girl in the background. I was the woman who rewrote the ending. 3 days after Christmas, I stood in front of the boutique's glass storefront for the first time as its new owner. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the frost on the windows shimmered like sequins on a velvet curtain. There was a certain stillness. In the morning, a hush before the world decided what to do with the day. I turned the key slowly. Inside, it looked the same as always: pristine displays, folded scarves, mannequins in winter coats with smug expressions carved into their fiberglass cheeks. But the silence felt different now. No Marissa clacking in heels, no Ethan whispering sweet nothings that stung later like acid. The boutique was mine. And yet, it wasn't revenge I felt. It was release. I walked through the space, every step echoing like a page turning in a long, painful book. When I reached Marissa's old office, I hesitated before opening the door. Inside, the scent of expensive perfume still lingered. A half-used lipstick sat beside a broken frame, the photo of her and Ethan from their first fashion expo. The glass had splintered at his smile. I sat in her chair, leaned back, and looked around the room. This was once my prison. Now it was my perch. Around noon, she came. Marissa, dressed in beige cashmere and oversized sunglasses like she was clinging to a glamour that no longer fit. "Rebecca," she said. No hello, no Merry Christmas. Just my name, like it still belonged to her. "I figured you'd show," I said calmly. "Your last box is in the back." She didn't move. Her jaw tightened. "Why did you do it?" she asked. I tilted my head. "You mean, purchase the entire boutique chain you abandoned when Ethan crashed your credit line? Or do you mean fire you publicly while handing out gift cards to your former employees?" Her nostrils flared. "You waited years to humiliate me?" I stood. Slowly. "No, Marissa. I waited years to free myself," she scoffed. "You could have taken the money, opened something new, but you had to take my name off the awning." I stepped closer. "That name wasn't yours. Not really. You built It on a lie. You stole my future. All I did was reclaim it. She looked around like the walls were betraying her too. Her fingers ran along the desk edge like she needed to hold on to something. You think you're better than me now? She said. No, I replied softly. I think I'm finally me. Silence. Then she did something I never expected. She sat down, right across from me, and for the first time since Ethan left me at that courthouse, we spoke as sisters, broken ones, bruised by the same man, the same upbringing, the same unrelenting chase for worth in a world that measured women in carrots and waistlines. She cried. I didn't. I had already cried enough for both of us. That evening, I stood outside the boutique again. We were putting up a new sign, Rebecca's Revival. Below it, proceeds go to women's shelters nationwide. The crowd that had once watched me lose everything was now watching me build something that could never be taken away, not by Ethan, not by Marissa, not by the girl I used to be. And inside, behind that very desk, I left a note in the drawer before locking up. Dear future owner, this business was built on broken promises, but it became a home for women who refused to stay broken. If you're reading this, continue the work. Make beauty mean something. It was Christmas Eve again. The boutique now Rebecca's Revival glowed from within. We had strung the windows with soft golden lights, placed holly wreaths at the corners, and opened the doors for anyone who needed warmth, food, or simply a place to be seen. I stood at the entrance in a deep burgundy coat, the same shade I once wore when Ethan proposed. How strange that a color once tied to heartbreak now felt like power. Inside, the register rang joyfully, but we weren't just selling scarves and coats anymore. Each product came with a card signed by the woman who made it. Beside the checkout, a board read, This Christmas, you're not alone. I watched as a young girl walked in, maybe 17, trembling in the cold. She had a backpack, a bruised cheek, and a look I knew all too well, someone who had been discarded. Without hesitation, Maya, the same teen who once lived in a laundromat, walked up and offered her cocoa, then a warm coat. No ID, no questions, just kindness. That moment right there was worth more than all the boutiques Marissa ever opened. After the last guest left, I walked to the back office, lit a single candle, and placed a frame on the shelf. It was a photo I never thought I'd display again. Me, Marissa, and Ethan at our high school graduation. Back when we were foolish enough to believe we'd never betray one another. I left the frame there not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. You can forgive without returning. You can move forward without forgetting. And you can rebuild, brick by glorious brick, without needing their apology. At midnight, snow began to fall outside. I stepped into the quiet alone, just like 10 years ago, only this time, not as the woman left behind. Now, I was the one leading the way. A girl passed by on the sidewalk and stared at the sign, Rebecca's Revival. She turned to her mom. Who's Rebecca? Her mother smiled. Someone who turned her pain into something beautiful. I thought back to Ethan. I hadn't seen him in years. Last I heard, he was managing a strip mall in South Carolina, divorced, bankrupt, and blaming everyone but himself. Marissa had moved to Arizona. She'd texted me once last spring. I'm sorry for all of it. I never replied. Some doors are meant to stay shut. Others, like the one I'd open tonight, are wide enough for everyone still learning to stand again. As I locked up the boutique and tucked the key into my purse, I felt something shift deep inside. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. Not to Ethan, not to Marissa, not even to myself. I had become the woman I used to dream about. Strong, soft, relentless. A protector, a creator, a survivor. This Christmas, I didn't just buy a business. I claimed my identity. The end reflection questions for the readers. Do you think Rebecca was right to buy the business as a form of justice? Would you have forgiven your sister after such a betrayal? How can we turn personal heartbreak into something healing for others? Subscribe to more revenge stories. Share, like, comment.